I'm always trying to figure out, you know, to talk or to write books or to try and impart ideas on people. It doesn't seem like to me that it's of much use unless it's useful, unless it actually is something you can use. I mean, we can talk about philosophies and we can talk about Buddhist ideas and all that's great. But I think at the end of the discussion, even though we might find it fascinating, when we walk away, it's kind of like, well, okay, next kind of thing. It's like it doesn't really, because we don't glean anything from it that we can use in our daily life. And I think those of you that have been coming here have noticed that I keep trying to put out little ideas or little mind games you can play with yourself to make these things, these ideas or ways of life useful in your everyday life. So you're not just using these things as a philosophical debate or something like that. So I got stuck the other week on the idea. Someone came to me and said, the word mindfulness has become so materialized that everybody's using it for everything. We all should be mindful, And of course, that's probably the basis of Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings, of mindfulness. And all of a sudden, I started thinking, I'm like, what does mindfulness mean? What does it mean to me? What does it mean to other people when they hear it? Because it's one of those words that doesn't really have a good definition. I mean, and I think if you asked, 10 different people in 10 different walks of life what mindfulness meant, they would probably give you a completely different answer. And so I started thinking, if I sit here and say, we should be mindful of this and mindful of that, that doesn't really do a lot of good. It doesn't really allow you to say, okay, I'm going to apply this to the way I live. So I started wondering what mindfulness meant to me, or how do I incorporate mindfulness into my everyday, moment by moment life. And I came up with a different expression. And that expression is that I notice things. And I thought, okay, well, if I play with that word, since it's newer and doesn't have all the baggage that the word mindfulness does, maybe there's a way to use that phrase and explore how to apply that idea to our lives. So the art of noticing is reserving some small part of your awareness to watch what you're doing, to what comes up, to your reactions, to how you address any situation. And it really kind of occurs, at first it will occur after the fact. It's like something will happen, and then you'll stop for a minute and go, oh, I was just fill in the blank. I was just angry. I was just happy. I was just, forgetful or whatever. And that's a really good way to start, is to sort of examine, anytime you have any kind of reaction to something, to intentionally look back for a moment and say, what just happened? How was I feeling? What happened? And that's a good way to start, because we've all been trained to just react to things. It seems to be okay in our culture. And I'm just speaking for myself again. But it seems to me, as I look out, that it's okay for people to simply react. And then if they do something that isn't necessarily socially acceptable, they just apologize for it. It's like, well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that, but I did, And so, and in a sense, that is kind of noticing. That is kind of like, oh, I just realized I just said the absolute wrong thing in this situation. Maybe I should, take a step back. But once we start having conscious awareness of what we have done and our reaction to it after the fact, we can start to cultivate as time goes on, the ability to notice while things are happening. And that's something that you have to basically teach yourself, because nobody's taught you that before. It's never had a useful purpose in anyone's life to notice what they're doing as they're doing it. But so it is something that you have to train yourself for. But what it does is it creates the space in which you do things. And I know maybe that's an odd thing to say, but you can get to this point where as the words are leaving your mouth, or as you're doing an activity, there's a little part of your mind that's observing what you're doing. And you're just noticing. You're not judging. You're not trying to decide whether you should or shouldn't. It's just that you become aware that is happening. And it gives you this sort of simultaneous pause in your mind of doing and watching at the same time. And what you'll find is that over time, if you start to get a little bit adept at this, is that you can catch yourself before you do things and decide whether or not what you're going to say or do is useful. A lot of the things we say just come out. And a lot of times they're not useful. A lot of times they're knee-jerk, absolutely. Thank you. It's like, why are you cutting your leg off? There must be some... No. What Zen story haven't I heard? So instead of simply saying, it would be useful to practice mindfulness, if we could develop this art of noticing how and what we do, it creates a space around what we do and allows us to sort of instantaneously decide whether or not it's going to help the given situation or not. And it's almost a visceral feeling. It's a feeling of space. It's a feeling of it's almost like slowing time down. It's until you experience it, it's hard to sort of imagine what it feels like. But it's like simultaneously watching and doing at the same time. And you say, well, what's the point of that? Doesn't that just mean that you're being aloof, with yourself, not let alone others? And it's not that. It's different than that. It's a way of expanding out from your individual, ego-based reaction and action in life to expanding out to consider what the effect of that is and what other things are happening at the same time. One of the things that I always encourage people to do is to sort of go against all of our upbringings. And in that upbringing, one of the things that we're taught from a very early age is that everything revolves around us, and everything that happens in the world is a reaction to or for us, and that we need to react and take a stand against whatever is going on, whether it's a little way or a big way. But we don't let anything just pass by. Everything we have to comment on, in our minds at least, if not outside. We think that everything that's happening is happening as us being the central player. I saw something the other day. It was about when you're young, you think that everybody's talking behind your back. As you get older, you think everybody's talking about the things that you're doing. And as you get older and older still, you realize they were never talking about you in the first